You weren't. Okay, remember, Custer is stationed at this point at the mouth of the Rosebud. And his job is to go down South Rosebud Creek and look for the Hostels. Where is he supposed to stop if he does not find the Hostels as he approaches down Rosebud Creek? The Wolf Mountains. And what's he supposed to do from the Wolf Mountains on? Stay there and send scouts out to find the location toward Little Bighorn. Very good. Okay, so at 12 noon on June 22nd, 1876, at 12 noon on June 22nd, 1876, Custer and the 7th Cavalry left the far west and began their march up Rosebud Creek toward the Wolf Mountains. But my birthday does have a significance with this battle, which we'll talk about.
Isn't it the 26th? Oh my God.
So at 12 noon on June 22nd, 1876, Custer and the 7th Cavalry left the far west and began their march up Rosebud Creek toward the Wolf Mountains. They traveled about 12 miles the first day and camped for the night. So from 12 noon on, they traveled 12 miles and set up camp. That would be for the night of June 22nd. They got up early in the morning on June 23rd. They marched about 33 miles and they camped at about 5 p.m. that evening. So they got up early in the morning of June 23rd. They marched about 33 miles and then camped that evening of the 23rd about 5 o'clock. On Saturday, June 24th, they were on the march by 5 a.m. On Saturday, June 24th, they were on the march by 5 a.m. They marched about 28 miles, and they went into camp a little earlier, about 2 p.m. that day. And there's a reason for that. So Saturday, June 24th, found the regiment on the march by about 5 a.m. They marched about 28 miles up Rosebud Creek, and they went into camp around 2 o'clock that afternoon. Obviously, they haven't done what? They have, no, but you're going to get there. But what haven't they run into so far? Any hostiles. So where are they now at 2 o'clock? Approximately. And you said it, Buck. They're approaching the Wolf Mountains. So they camped around 2, and early that evening, Custer called his chief of scouts to join him for a meeting. Who was his chief of scouts? Charles Varnum. Okay, very good. Charles Varnum. So early that evening of Saturday, June 24th, after setting up camp around 2 p.m., early that evening, Custer called his chief of scouts, Lieutenant Charles Varnum, to join him for a meeting. Now, while Custer was marching from the mouth of Rosebud to the Wolf Mountains, his scouts were out in front of him still scouting. And they had told Custer by the time they camped that night that more than likely the Hostels were in the Little Bighorn River Valley. Okay, so he doesn't see them, but that's where he thinks they are. Well, the reason that Custer called Varnum into a meeting is he wanted him to take Indian scouts and go to a spot known as the Crow's Nest. Okay? Custer ordered Lieutenant Varnum to take his Indian scouts and march to a location, a spot known as the Crow's Nest. Does anybody want to guess what that spot was? I've been there. Can't get on anymore, it's private land. It's a high point in the Wolf Mountains that you could easily see the Little Bighorn River Valley. Okay? And if there were Indians in that valley, they felt like they could see them from the Crow's Nest. So Custer, early in the evening, called it Charles Varnum, and he said, take your Crow Scouts and head to this high point in the Wolf Mountains known as the Crow's Nest and see if you can locate the hostels in the Little Bighorn River Valley. So Varnum takes the following people with him besides his scouts. Anybody want to guess who he took with him? Somebody said him before, I think. He took Mitch Boyer, and he took another civilian guide by the name of Charlie Reynolds. So Varnum takes Mitch Boyer and Charlie Reynolds. Boyer is a scout, Reynolds is a guide. Okay? So he takes those two and the Indian scouts. And they depart that camp, or they set up at 2 o'clock and head for the Crow's Nest early that evening. So Lieutenant Varnum, along with Mitch Boyer, guide Charlie Reynolds, and the Indian scouts, depart camp early in the evening of the 24th of June and head for the Crow's Nest. They arrive at the Crow's Nest just before light the next morning of the 25th. So they reach the Crow's Nest just before light on June 25th. Meanwhile, Custer had ordered his soldiers to keep their horses saddled after he had Varnum depart in case what happened. So they located the Indians and needed to be on the march. He didn't want to waste any time. Because what's he worried about them doing? Not attacking, escaping. And that's a weird concept when you think about what happened to him. But he's not worried about, he doesn't have any idea how many Indians are down there. He just doesn't want them to get away. Because he's supposed to put them on the reservation. So he's got his horses saddled, ready to go. Okay? That'll take us to our next subtopic then, which is the Crow's Nest. What happened at the Crow's Nest? The Crow's Nest. I've been on top of that. It's an incredible view. What time did they get there? Just before light. So, they basically waited until they could see. They got up there before light. They simply sat and rested until light came that morning of the 25th. Well, at first light, the Indian scouts told Lieutenant Varnum that they saw a large pony herd in the Bighorn Valley. They could see a large pony herd. Now, from the Crow's Nest to the Bighorn River, Little Bighorn River Valley, was about 15 miles. So they're looking 15 miles and say that they can see a large pony herd. So at first light, these Indian scouts tell Lieutenant Varnum that they see a large pony herd in the Bighorn Valley, which was approximately 15 miles from the Crow's Nest. So they're saying they see that at 15 miles. And they even estimated about 2,000 ponies. These Indian scouts estimated to Varnum that they saw what they thought was about 2,000 ponies. Now, they described them to Varnum as worms in the grass. Because what they did is they looked that distance and it's all green, right? Early, late June, hasn't quite started browning up yet. And these horses, a lot of them are brown, well, whitish, light colored, some are brown. But they claim that they see 2,000 ponies in the Bighorn River Valley, and they look like worms in the grass. So what does Varnum do as soon as he gets that word? He's going to tell Custer. How's he going to do that? He's going to send word back to Custer. They're not all going back. He's going to send a messenger or a dispatch back to Custer, back across the Wolf Mountains where the 7th Cavalry is camped. So it's early in the morning when they spot this. Custer gets the news at 8 a.m. the next morning. So the guy was skedaddling, the person that was bringing it back. So Custer at 8 a.m. the morning of the 25th gets the news of this big pony herd that's being witnessed from the Crow's Nest. Well, I think light would probably be more probably 3 or 4 hours. But he was one guy, so I mean, he was going. You know what I mean? He had a job to do. Now, what do you think Custer did when he got that word? What? Say it.
Yeah, just saddle everyone up in that.
Well, good guess. Actually, he took a horse that had not been saddled, bareback, jumped on the horse, and rode as fast as he could to the crow's nest because he wanted to see it himself. So he left everybody there, jumped on a horse bareback, and rode to the crow's nest to observe for himself. Well, he gets to the crow's nest. Lieutenant Barnum takes him to the area where they're looking and points towards the direction. And Custer even grabs Barnum's field glasses, or we call them binoculars, and he could not see him. And he got very, very frustrated. So he was very frustrated. He couldn't see him himself. And the Indian scouts assured Barnum they are there. There is a large pony herd in the Bighorn Valley. And Barnum, I'm not sure he could see him either, but he assures Custer, General, they're there. Even though Custer couldn't see him, and he got very frustrated, even took field glasses, couldn't see him. So, what he does then is they all go back to the camp, and he gets everyone ready to go around 10 a.m. I mean, these guys are riding now, 10 a.m. So Custer rouses all of his officers and has a meeting with his officers at 10 a.m. the morning of the 25th. And he's going to tell them their plan. Because what do they know now? They know where the hostiles are. What they don't know is how many there are. Although 2,000 ponies should have told him something. Okay? Well, when he meets with his officers at 10 a.m., he tells his officers that they will rest the remainder of the day on the 25th and attack early the morning of the 26th. Because what do they still have? The element of surprise. Because, you know, they've seen the Indians, but the Indians don't know they're there. So Custer meets with his officers at 10 a.m. on the morning of the 25th, and he informs the officers that the 7th Cavalry will rest the remainder of that day and attack the morning of June 26th.
And that's your birthday.
That's my birthday, but things changed before my birthday. Not the date, but the day.
You were born that day.
Tom Custer came up to his brother apprehensively and said, "We got some bad news. Captain Yates," remember G.W. Yates? He and his company, during the march to that point, had some hardtack that fell out of their saddlebags. They lost some hardtack on the march that got them to where they were. Okay, why would that be bad news, do you think?
The Indians are finding it.
What?
The
Okay, what do you
Indians are
say?
finding it.
The Indians are finding it? Well, they lost it and they needed it because they needed it for food. So you're partially right, and Brooks actually absolutely right. A company led by Sergeant William Curtis, his company was Company F, and we'll explain that to you later. When they went back to search for that lost hardtack, who did they see rifling through it? The Indians. Which meant what? They were discovered. Their element of surprise is no longer. So very good, you two. So the hardtack was needed, as Kyle said. And Sergeant William Curtis and his company, Company F, once they discovered they had lost the hardtack, went back looking for it. And when they were searching for it, they found it. The problem was they found Indians going through it, which means that Custer's element of surprise is gone. Not, does everybody in the Bighorn Valley know he's there yet? No, but there are enough people that know he's there, it won't take long. But Shania, you got a question?
Who was Company F?
He's on your sheet there. Sergeant Curtis. I didn't put him on it? Oh, William Curtis. Yeah, Sergeant William Curtis. So that takes us to our next subtopic, which is Custer's decision to attack the hostiles. What's he going to do now, Brookie? He's not going to wait till the next morning. What's he going to do?
Attack that.
He's going to go that day. We'll talk about that in a minute. Okay? So Custer's decision to attack the hostiles. Now when Tom Custer told his brother that the 7th Cavalry had been discovered by the Indians, Custer knew that his element of surprise was gone. He was very, very angry. And he immediately sounded an officer's call, which means what? That he meets with all of the officers. So he immediately calls for an officer's call as soon as his brother Tom gives him the bad news about the found hardtack. He's very angry. When Custer met with his officers, he informed them they would attack immediately. Why did he make this decision other than knowing we know that he lost the element of surprise? Because he doesn't want to what? He doesn't want the Indians to what? Escape his left flank. That's his entire thought process. Not he's going to engage him, he doesn't want to lose him. So the element of surprise is gone. If the Indians find out he's there, he's afraid they will run and escape his left flank. So the 7th Cavalry began an immediate march from their camp through the Wolf Mountains, because they stopped maybe just short, remember, of the Wolf Mountains, toward the Bighorn River Valley. So now they've made their turn. They're marching from camp through the Wolf Mountains toward the Bighorn River Valley. Now you're going to see, we call it a saddle gap ridge. You know what that is in a mountain? So if you have a mountain, if you have mountains, and all of a sudden you have something like that, that's a saddle back ridge. And that's normally what you try to do what? Go through those. Makes it easy travel. So the 7th Cavalry began an immediate march from camp through this saddleback ridge, which you'll see when we get to the Battle of Bighorn, towards the Bighorn River Valley. Well, they got 1 mile past the Wolf Mountains. In other words, they got over the Wolf Mountains and traveled 1 more mile, and they stopped. It was 12 noon on June 25th, 1876. So they marched from camp. They traveled through the Wolf Mountains, through this saddleback opening. They get 1 mile on the other side of the Wolf Mountains towards the Little Bighorn River Valley, and they stop. It is 12 noon. What does Custer do when he stops at 12 noon on June 25th, 1876? Our next subtopic. Do I have another one?
No.
Good. That's a good surprise. The division of the 7th Cavalry. He's going to divide the 7th Cavalry into 3 groups. He's going to divide his force into 3 groups. And it's crucial that you know these, because this is where we end. When we go to the battlefield on Thursday and Friday, Steve Adelson is going to, my buddy, is going to come through some of this, and then he's going to take off from here. Okay? So, here's what Custer does. He's 1 mile past the Wolf Mountains. It's 12 noon on June 25th, 1876, and he divides the 7th Cavalry as follows. Group 1. He gave command of Group 1 to Captain Frederick Benteen. He gave command of Group 1 to Captain Frederick Benteen. And Benteen took the following 3 companies of the 7th Cavalry. He took the following 3 companies. He took Company H, Company D, and Company K. So Custer's first group, under the command of Captain Benteen, he took companies H, D, and K. 125 men in those 3 companies.
Wait, 125 per company or like?
No, total. What was his job? What job did he give Group 1 under Benteen? What is his job from that point on, from a mile past the Wolf Mountains? Protect his left flank. So did he send him off away from the rest of the group? He did. Captain Benteen was ordered by Custer to cover the left flank. In other words, to go southwest from the rest of the group, ensuring that the Hostels did not escape past his march. So if you get past the Wolf Mountains, and here's Custer, and he's going to split them into 3 groups. He's going to give Benteen this group, and he's going to protect the left flank. He's going to go southwest and make sure that these Indians in this valley Do not try to escape that way. That's his job. Again, do they have any idea how many they know? How many they have? They don't have any idea. Group 2. He gave command of Group 2 to Major Marcus Reno. Major Marcus Reno. And he also gave him 3 companies. Reno was given 3 companies. A, G, and M. A, G, and M. Maybe you're into drawing. Okay, Reno was given A, G, and M. His job, 140 men by the way, was to stay with Custer. He stayed with Custer. A, G, and M, 140 men stayed with Custer. And the final group, Custer took command of. And he took companies C, E, F, I, and L. C, E, F, I, and L. And that was 209 men. The only company we haven't mentioned is Company B. And Company B was known as the pack train. It was a pack train that was escorted by soldiers. And it was under the command of Captain Thomas McDougall. Thomas McDougall. I don't have that on your sheet. Okay, I'll write it up here. Thomas McDougall. Oh, not MAC, I'm sorry.